The introduction. The fading sun cast long shadows over the quiet town of Cedar Grove, where secrets nestled in every corner. Known for its picturesque landscape and tightly knit community, it was a place where everyone seemed to know one another, or at least thought they did. Tucked away in the heart of this serene setting was a derelict farmhouse, surrounded by overgrown weeds and drafty windows, silently bearing witness to decades of whispers. On brisk autumn mornings, fog rolled in, thickening the air with an eerie heaviness that both intrigued and unnerved the locals. It was here, amongst the cracking paint and splintered wood, that a chilling discovery would soon unravel the town's delicate facade. When a group of teenagers, daring each other to venture closer, stumbled upon a hidden cellar door, they had no idea the skeletons that remained buried within the dusty depths could shatter their innocent perceptions of what Cedar Grove truly was. As curiosity took hold, one of the teenagers pushed the door wide open, revealing a set of narrow, slippery stairs that descended into near darkness. The hushed hiss of the surrounding trees recoiled as if in caution as they began their descent. What lay ahead was a puzzle, fragmented papers and torn photographs strewn across the floor, remnants of a life long forgotten. Within these confines, the past awaited its reckoning, ready to expose the reality lingering beneath the surface of this quiet town. Cedar Grove would never be the same again. The victim. As news of the discovery spread through Cedar Grove, the townsfolk converged on the diner, exchanging nervous glances and hushed tones. The air was thick with anticipation. The secret had a name: Jane Thompson, a vibrant young woman who had vanished 3 years earlier, had become an unsettling ghost in their midst. Her smiling face adorned countless missing posters, each one slowly fading like the hope of her return. Jane was a bright light in the community, a dedicated volunteer, an aspiring artist, and a friend to all. On that fateful day in 2020, she had taken her usual path through the local park, a route she felt safe enough to stroll alone. However, as the hours passed, her absence sparked frantic searches. Her parents worked day and night, clinging to the hope that she would come home. But as time wore on, the case grew cold, soon relegated to the yearly reminders held on the anniversary of her disappearance. Now, with a connection to that long-lost hope, a hidden cellar and the remnants within Cedar Grove's past had clawed its way to the surface. The pieces of Jane's life lay scattered before them, a grim puzzle begging to be solved, but also forcing the community to confront its own complicity in the silence surrounding her fate. With each new detail, the facade of safety in Cedar Grove began to shatter, exposing an undercurrent of secrets and fears that had gone unacknowledged for too long. What had happened to Jane Thompson began to spiral into a collective reckoning, one that would haunt the town as much as the unsolved mystery of her disappearance. The crime scene. Local law enforcement swarmed the dilapidated farmhouse the day after the teenager's fateful discovery. The scene was methodically cordoned off, but the murmurs of curiosity echoed from the growing crowd gathered outside. Officers in navy blue uniforms moved with purpose, their expressions a mixture of determination and unease. Photographers documented the unfolding scene as forensic teams began to sift through the debris. The cellar was smaller than anticipated, the low ceiling adding to the damp, oppressive atmosphere. As detectives stepped carefully over all debris, their footsteps muted against the concrete floor, they scrutinized every corner of the room. Torn photographs clung to the walls, remnants of a family that once thrived here. Smiles captured in time, now replaced by the unsettling void of the unknown. Evidence markers rose like sentinels, indicating items significant to the case. A shattered frame bearing Jane's drifting smile, a frayed scarf that used to keep her warm, and a torn journal Pages yellowed with age. The journal now opened on a splintered table was the most haunting piece. Disjointed thoughts and sketches revealed a young woman grappling with her demons, a profundity that hinted at more than just a simple disappearance. As the sun broke through the overcast sky, illuminating the gloom of the cellar, it cast an eerie glow on the remnants of Jane's life. For those investigating, it was clear that this was more than a missing persons case. It was a tangled web of emotions, relationships, and perhaps a darkness lying just beneath Cedar Grove's unassuming surface. As they documented the scene, investigators understood they were not just solving a crime, but unraveling the threads of a life that had long been intertwined with their own community. The early investigation. With the discovery of Jane Thompson's belongings, the Cedar Grove Police Department shifted into high gear. The small station, usually adorned with mountain murals and bustling with locals seeking assistance or a friendly chat, transformed into a nerve center of urgency and tension. Detectives pored over files, looking for connections, clues, any lead that might help them make sense of this newfound evidence. Lead investigator Sergeant Michael Hargrove was a veteran of the force, his patience honed by years of navigating the intricacies of human behavior. He immersed himself in Jane's life, retracing her steps through interviews with friends, family, and former classmates. The community that once took Jane for granted was now full of contradictions, their memories tainted by the weight of guilt, each whisper coated in uncertainty. The more they dug, the more complex her story became. Jane had struggled with anxiety, and though well-loved, she occasionally felt isolated from those around her. Old friends recounted late-night phone calls filled with tears and tangled thoughts. Yet each recollection seemed tainted by an all-too-familiar regret. "I should have known" became a haunting refrain. Amidst the emotional interviews, a breakthrough came when one of her close friends revealed that Jane had confided in her about meeting someone online, a connection that deepened as their virtual exchanges evolved into plans for meeting in person. The friend could remember snippets of Jane's words, the thrill laced with trepidation. The team now had a name, a potential lead, and with it, a glimmer of hope, a tangled thread that could unravel the mystery of her disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, Cedar Grove teetered between the familiar comfort of daily life and the stunning realization that darkness had lurked far closer than they'd ever imagined. The dead ends. Weeks passed since the investigation into Jane Thompson's disappearance began, but the sense of urgency became increasingly burdened by frustrations and dead ends. Sergeant Hargrove, along with his team, tracked down the online connection Jane had forged, only to discover that the individual had since disappeared, vanishing from social platforms and leaving behind no trace. It felt as if every lead they pursued crumbled like dry leaves underfoot, promising at first, yet ultimately fruitless. As the detectives sifted through computational data, they encountered a series of false identities and pranks that plagued Jane's online life. The internet was a labyrinth, and Jane had inadvertently wandered through corridors filled with shadows, some innocuous while others disturbingly malicious. Each chat log they uncovered offered tantalizing snippets, but led only to walls reinforced by an overwhelming anonymity. With dead ends piling up, the emotional toll began to weigh on the team. Colleagues exchanged weary glances, frustration painted on their faces as they faced the grim reality that Cedar Grove and its tight-knit community have harbored secrets deeper than they had anticipated. Hargrove found himself stuck in a cycle of thoughts. Were they missing something obvious? Were there signs in the everyday interactions that had gone unnoticed? Meanwhile, the more the investigation stalled, the more the townsfolk whispered. Rumors spread like wildfire in the quiet streets. Claims of an old curse, suspicions of townsfolk seen behaving strangely, and accusations of blame directed at Jane's family. As shadows deepened in public perception, Cedar Grove began to fracture, and the already fragile bonds were tested. The investigation had outgrown its simple narrative. Now, it loomed like a dark cloud over a town desperate for resolution. A break. Just as hope began to fade, an unexpected lead emerged from a familiar source. One evening, as Sergeant Hargrove sat sifting through Jane's files, a new piece of evidence arrived to tip from an anonymous call. The voice on the line crackled with hesitation but held a cogent urgency. The caller claimed to have seen Jane moments before her disappearance, mentioning a shadowy figure lingering near the park where Jane was last known to walk. With initial skepticism, Hargrove and his team set out to investigate the caller's details. They returned to the park to re-examine surveillance footage from nearby businesses once again, this time with renewed scrutiny. The clips revealed something previously unnoticed. A dark figure, obscured by trees, but unmistakably hovering near the path Jane walked that afternoon. The shape remained a mystery, but the call had breathed new life into the investigation. The team worked tirelessly, using facial recognition technology to try and identify the figure. Days turned into weeks, and just as their enthusiasm began to wane again, a name surfaced. Derek Mills, a 27-year-old man with a knack for online trolling and a history of harassment against young women online. With a faint glimmer of hope now rising, Hargrove organized a meeting for his team to discuss strategies for tracing Mills' whereabouts. Cedar Grove felt the tension shift as whispers transformed into fervent conversations. The townsfolk clung to this new thread, eyes wide with cautious optimism. Within the office walls, Hargrove understood the mounting pressure. With each passing hour, he knew time was of the essence. Where was Mills now? And could he hold the answers to unlocking the enigma that had haunted Cedar Grove for years? The suspect. The search for Derek Mills intensified as officers developed a profile on the man who had quickly become the focal point of their investigation. Hargrove received reports that Mills frequented online forums and gaming platforms, often engaging with vulnerable individuals through deceptive personas. The more they learned, the more chilling it became. Each interaction he had was meticulously crafted, built upon a web of lies designed to ensnare his targets. As Hargrove surveyed Mills' online presence, an unsettling pattern emerged for her encounters with women that had left several claiming harassment. A visit to his last known address unveiled a cluttered apartment littered with signs of a disturbed mindset. Stacks of receipts for online purchases, sketches of countless women torn from magazine pages, and a collection of peculiar notes, unsettling in their obsessive nature. Detectives soon discovered that Mills had a reputation in the gaming community, an imposing figure shrouded in murky remarks, offensive memes, and denials that echoed louder than rationality. Rumors floated around the forums about his aggressive demeanor, warnings from users who claimed to have had close brushes with his erratic behavior. In the wake of the unfolding findings, pressures mounted. Hargrove knew they had to act swiftly. The town breathed down his neck, their patience waning and emotions simmering. With enough evidence to warrant surveillance, they set up a comprehensive stakeout outside Mill's last address. Hargrove felt tension coil in his chest as officers combed details for solid leads. Then, late one evening, a glimmer of movement caught their attention. A figure shuffled into view, tall and familiar, dressed in a dark hoodie, eyes darting restlessly. Hargrove's heart raced as the team prepared to make their move, aware that the confrontation could either lead them closer to answers or push them into a confrontation they weren't prepared for. The trial. The courtroom was hushed, the air heavy with anticipation, as Cedar Grove finally bore witness to a trial that had become a focal point of tension and intrigue. Derek Mills sat at the defendant's table, his expression guarded as he faced the jury, a group of individuals drawn from the community he had irrevocably shaped. The prosecution presented a strong case, a pattern of predatory behavior. The harrowing testimonies from Jane's friends, who had feared her safety, and the damning evidence uncovered by the investigation. Hargrove sat in the audience, heart racing with the knowledge that each word spoken in that courtroom was a step towards closure for the town. Jane's family sat just behind him, glancing at the accused with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. For them, this was not merely a trial. It was a chance to reclaim a sense of justice that had long been denied. As the prosecution laid out their case, the defense seemed lost, grasping at threads of doubt. Mill's attorney argued that the evidence linking him to Jane's disappearance was circumstantial, relying heavily on his client's supposed innocence that rang hollow in the eyes of the community. They claimed the narrative had been shaped by hysteria, a town desperate to assign blame in its desire for closure. The courtroom erupted with tension when Jane's friends and family provided their emotional testimonies. They recounted nights spent worrying, felt their dread wash over the jury, and depicted the vibrant life Jane had led before it was extinguished. Gasps echoed when Jane's journal was introduced as evidence, revealing her struggles in vivid detail. It was a powerful moment of connection that left no doubt about the significance of her voice. As days turned into weeks, the jurors wrestled with the weight of the testimony and the grim evidence presented before them. Hargrove sat on the edge of his seat, knowing that whatever the final verdict, Cedar Grove could never return to the innocence it once knew. Their minds were flooded with unanswered questions, and it was clear the scars of this trial would linger long after the gavel came down. The aftermath. The verdict came down with the finality of a thunderclap, reverberating throughout the small town of Cedar Grove. Derek Mills was found guilty on all charges related to the kidnapping and murder of Jane Thompson, a decision that brought both relief and fresh waves of grief. His expression remained stoic, but the courtroom erupted, a cacophony of emotions spilling forth as Jane's family embraced in tears. A fleeting moment of closure for a wound that had bled within the community for years. But the aftermath extended far beyond the courtroom's walls. Cedar Grove, once a picturesque slice of small-town Americana, traded its innocence for an unshakable shadow. The scent of fear now lingered in the air, mingling with the crisp autumn leaves. As residents walked the streets, their eyes often darted toward the park where Jane had last been seen, their memories haunted by the chilling reality of what had transpired. Support groups sprung up, offering a safe harbor for those affected. Friends gathered to share stories, confronting their regret over missed signs and unspoken fears, bound together by empathy and loss. Yet, amidst collective healing, Whispered disagreements on how the town overlooked Jane's struggles simmered just below the surface. Hargrove watched as the dynamics within Cedar Grove shifted. Parental instinct took on new urgency as families tightened their circles and embraced a heightened vigilance. The echoes of Jane's name resonated not just as a memory, but as a painful reminder that darkness often hid in plain sight. Years later, a small memorial for Jane Thompson would stand in the park where her laughter had once filled the air. It would symbolize both loss and the vow of a community to be vigilant, attentive to one another. In a world rife with hidden danger, Cedar Grove emerged from tragedy forever altered, carrying its scars like a badge of testaments of resilience and the lessons learned through pain. Reflection. The years that followed the trial shaped Cedar Grove into a community more attuned to its undercurrents. In the aftermath of Jane's tragic story, the town made a conscious effort to cultivate deeper connections and foster open dialogues. Neighborhood watch programs expanded, and mental health awareness took center stage in schools and community centers alike, as they vowed to be vigilant in understanding the struggles that often lay hidden beneath the surface. Sergeant Hargrove continued his work with a renewed sense of purpose, dedicating himself to outreach programs designed to educate the community about the importance of mental health and safety. He often found himself reflecting on the case that had changed him. Jane's story was more than just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. As he visited the memorial on the anniversary of Jane's disappearance, Hargrove laid a bouquet of flowers and stood in solemn silence, grappling with the lessons gleaned from loss and heartache. Jane had become a symbol of resilience in Cedar Grove, a reminder that while darkness could encroach, the light of community could push it back. This poignant reflection was not about dwelling in sorrow, but about kindle the flames of hope, change, and collective responsibility, an enduring legacy that inspired the town to look after one another. Cedar Grove would forever carry Jane's spirit, a guiding force in realizing that even amidst tragedy, warmth and connection could be reignited.